Ms. Wilson, if you would let the minutes reflect that Ms. Emil, Ms. Ayers, Mr. Cole, and I are present this evening along with Dr. Jones. Mr. Kunka has notified us that he has been called out of town to New Orleans on personal business. We'll begin the evening with the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. And I would ask Ms. Ayers if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and Mr. Cole if he would lead us in the invocation. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunities which you heard before us. We ask you to keep us ever mindful of the many, many blessings which we enjoy. We ask also that you help us tonight as we make decisions on behalf of Mountain County Schools and students. Bless and guide us as we move forward. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Now you can see. Thank you very much. I suppose I'm thinking a little like your students at this point, you know, school years ago. All right, so that takes us to the agenda for the evening. Are there motions to make the amendments to the proposed agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we add an agenda item for the 4K, the resolution for Bell Mead on the James.
All right, is there a second to Mr. Cole's motion?
Second.
All right, any other changes necessary to the agenda? All right, we'll vote on Mr. Cole's motion first. All in favor of approving an addition to the proposed agenda item 4K, please respond with aye. Aye. Any noes? Motion carries 4-0. Mr. Trump is absent. All right, so that puts us in posture. We have a proposed agenda in front of us, including item 4K. Without further need for modification, is there a motion regarding that proposed agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion, is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the proposed agenda for the evening, including the newly added item 4K, please respond with aye. Aye. Any noes? Motion carries 4-0. Takes us to the first public comment period of the evening. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board regarding items of interest. The first public comment period of the evening, there is a time limit associated with 3 minutes per individual and 5 minutes per group with a 30-minute total time limit. We would ask that you direct your comments to the board as a whole, not to individual board members. Anyone wishing to address the board, please come forward and be heard. Anyone wishing to address the board during public comment period? All right, seeing no movement, I'll bring the public comment period to a close. Takes us to our first presentation of the evening. Dr. Jones?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Alejandro has a presentation on our Code of Conduct, which we are proposing to rename Student Rights and Responsibilities based on some guidance we've gotten from the legislative session that just ended and some changes, as well as a kind of philosophical shift to move it to closer to the work we're doing with both PBIS and BTSS. So Dr. Alejandro is going to lead us through those proposed changes. This is for information at this point. Yes. We'll be bringing back to you at our first meeting in August for approval of the updated Code of Conduct.
Thank you. So again, as Dr. Jones stated, we have asked to rename our Code of Student Conduct to Student Rights and Responsibilities. We felt that better reflected what we had for our expectations for our students, and I'll discuss that a little bit more in depth. I would like to just recognize the group of folks that helped put this together. We asked earlier in the spring for the school-based administrative teams to take a look at the existing Code of Conduct and for them to provide feedback on things that they saw that there were needs either to update based on their school level experience or things that they had on individual student needs. And so that was the first step. And then Chris Gwaltney, our disciplinary hearing officer, as well as Katie Wojcicki, our director of student services and interventions, and myself sat together over the course of several days to go through the existing Code of Conduct and make the suggested changes. So where we were coming from as we were approaching this was we felt like we had the charge to align those conduct expectations with PBIS, our positive behavioral interventions and supports, as well as our tiered supports that we have for our students, and then also to match that with our existing practices, what we're really in our philosophies that we have in our current classrooms. We took a look at a variety of different resources, and I'm going to lay out some of those for you in a few minutes. And then we also, as part of our Code of Student Conduct, at the very end of the Code of Conduct, there is a litany of required notifications, and those are kind of lost in the back, but there are things that we owe our public and our constituents to notify them of, and so we've actually pulled those out, and we will use it in a separate document to notify them of the required notifications, and have separated that from the Code of Student Conduct. So we feel like we are better presenting what is expected of us to our constituents. Some of the resources that we used, we of course used our existing Code of Conduct. Ms. Gwaltney, Ms. Wojcicki, and myself traveled to a handbook training, and at the state level they call the Code of Conduct a handbook. And VASSP, the Secondary School Principals Group, put together a training, and we spent all day in Lynchburg, and they did a nice job outlining some of the changes and just some of the philosophical things that we may want to consider. There are several guiding documents that the DOE provides: the Student Conduct Policy Guidelines, the Juvenile Law Handbook, comes from the VDCJS, that's Criminal Justice System. We had some legislative updates based on the most recent General Assembly. We also had some code of Virginia references that we wanted to make sure that we were matching our code with what existing code was. As I mentioned, we got feedback from school-based administrative teams, and then we dug into the existing school board policy to make sure that anything that we were looking at that was coming as a recommendation from either legislative changes or school-based administrative changes, that they actually matched what was in our existing school policy. So I just want to mention a few of the big changes that we had, and if you normally when we create a document like this we would redline something for you, but we made such sweeping changes in some areas that it really is a new document in many ways. But in the big picture, we really enjoyed putting together the vision, the mission, and the philosophy. We used the vision and mission that the strategic planning group has worked with, but then we started working on the philosophy, and the philosophy matches that VTSS and PBIS model that we've been using in all of our schools. Again, I updated the legislative session, but then we also reorganized some of the content, some things that were in multiple places. We grouped them into a single place so that our students and our parents have one place to look for an item, and it will make it a little bit easier and more user-friendly for both our students, our parents, and our administrators. With the offense codes, those are codes like horseplay or bullying or drug offenses, and we actually had many local codes that we have created but then are mapped behind the scenes to state codes, and instead what we did in this new version is we are just using the state codes, and what we will do from there is train our administrators on how to use the state codes to match what they have been doing in practice in their classrooms and in their schools. We also took a look at the discipline crime violence report that we have to submit each year to make sure that the codes that we most use were in line with what we had in our Code of Conduct. Some of the hot topics that we addressed, and these are hot topics always with the Code of Conduct, our disruptive behavior section is one of the largest sections of the code, and we really worked at defining what our expectations were for behavior. So you'll see sections that say specifically what we expect for behavior from students in that section. In bullying, we made sure that we matched what is in the code, but also we addressed some of the cyberbullying issues and some of the media, social media things that we have been working with regularly. Substance abuse, we reorganized that area as well, again to match some of the things that we were seeing in the buildings. Over-the-counter medication was not mentioned, but in one spot, and we reorganized that and again spelled things out and delineated things so that it would be more user-friendly for our parents, our students, and our administrators. We also spent a lot of time looking at definitions and in defining words, but we didn't define them. We used what the code said, or what the DOE said was a definition for a term, or what the Department of Criminal Justice said was a term meant, or possibly what school board policy said a term was. We wanted to make sure that it was clear and consistent for our community. And then the dispositions are what we might call the consequences. In the old code, you might see in one section that there was a parent contact. In another section, there was a parent conference. And then in another section, there was a conference with parent. And we streamlined these so that they were all the same, but we also followed the guidance from the state as far as what the dispositions would be. And in most sections, it allows for a wide variety of dispositions. I think one of the only places that we limited dispositions was in attendance, where we don't suspend or expel students for attendance behaviors, and we added a threat assessment in our threat section, but for the most part you'll see all of the dispositions are the same in each of the sections. And then at the end of the code, which is now our student rights and responsibilities, which we're calling a guide, not a code, we aligned all of the suspension information so that if it was mentioned elsewhere in the code, in the guide, that it would be the same in that final section. And it really spells out for parents, teachers, students what the guidelines are for going through a suspension, what the requirements are, who can do it, when they can do it, what the length can be, and any appeal procedures. So again, just kind of streamlining that section. For our next steps with this, we will get our final legislative update after July 1st when everything is finalized. Again, that will include the required notifications, and we do have some education-related laws. You'll see in the draft that we have presented that there are some highlighted areas. Those are things that are pending final decisions and final notifications. Some of that is attendance-related and some of it's suspension-related. We also want to be able to provide this at this point as a draft to our schools so that if they are working on their school-based student handbooks, that they can match those items within their student handbooks to what we have put in the code. We also, later this summer, on August 9th, we're going to do a legal update with all of our administrative teams, and what part of that legal update will be educating them on the way that we plan to implement this new guide for student rights and responsibilities, but it also is going to work on some other things that we have within that legal realm. We'll also look at performance evaluation, and we'll look at some school safety items on August 9th. And then we will request a final approval from you all for the guide at the August meeting. That's it.
Questions from the board for Dr. Alejandro or Dr. Bennett? So, tell me again the members of the group who put this together. I apologize. You
It's
said
okay.
at the beginning.
It was myself and Katie Wojcicki and Chris Waltney were the ones that really took on the getting into the editing part of it, but we actually have talked to all of the school-based administrative teams prior to it.
So how many pages less is it?
Well, because we pulled the required notifications out, it is 22 pages fewer, but there are required notifications that will be submitted differently. It's exactly 50 pages. Doesn't that feel great?
Less the better.
Yes.
So your next step then is to, who's the next set of reviewers?
Well, it's now out for, we've actually already had all of the administrative teams review this
Okay.
draft before we presented it to you all, and now it's out for public view
Okay.
because it's here at the meeting.
Have you sat down, let me ask you a question here. Have you sat down with anybody from the sheriff's office and talked about what's in here in terms of some of the things that are criminal violations in addition to administrative violations to make sure that they're comfortable with how it's being presented in terms of the interaction, the meshing? You know,
Yes.
I just want to make sure that the two are working together.
So we haven't specifically spoken with them, but that's a great idea, and we will share that out then with our counterparts. But you will note that in the code, there's, on the offense codes, there are asterisks.
Right.
Those are all codes that if we use those codes, we are required to report to law enforcement.
Yeah, and I've looked through it, and I know that in some sections it specifically says that it's going to be reported to the sheriff's office.
Yes.
And I know that you give cautions within the body of the document, that are, for example, with the possession of illegal substances.
Yes.
Okay, but I guess that there are other things that would be illegal to possess or other types of things. And I just want to make sure that, you know, we're very clear within the policy how we're managing that, and that we're engaging the law enforcement at the right points in the process, and everybody's working together closely.
Yes. We will share
Would be
with
my
them.
suggestion.
No, we'll be glad to share with them, absolutely.
Mr. Cole.
First of all, I say I appreciate your work on this because it's a huge document. It's been complicated and complex. every time the state legislature meets. But, you know, I guess my hope is that parents will read this and look at this and at least glance over it so they have some idea of what's there. But to facilitate that, will this document be searchable once it's available to the public, so that they type in plagiarism, something will pop up on plagiarism, and they can see what that's for. Yeah, because my gut feeling is most parents only look at it when it becomes an issue for their students, and then they're looking to see what the ramifications might or might not be, and what their response should be. So, you know, my concern is twofold. It's that we have a document that's well done, and I think y'all done a good job, and based on what I've seen at this point, I've read it thoroughly, but that it's also easily accessible and easily, you know, they can find information very quickly if they need to.
So to that point, the table of contents, once it is posted as a PDF, is a searchable link within the table of contents if they wanted to be that basic. But also then just a general search as a PDF, yes. So if you had a student who was up for expulsion, you would see every time expulsion was in there, and they could read every single thing, so they could be well prepared if they had to come before you all for anything.
So where we post this on the internet, we may need to put that information on there too, that this is a searchable document, this is how you search it. Or maybe a link to something that says, this is how you search this document.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I wish it was 30 pages shorter. I understand that it can't be, but you know, but nonetheless, it's a sign of where we are in the society, that we have to basically notify people of everything that they should not do. That's another discussion entirely.
And to that point, Mr. Cole, there are things in the code there are things that are in state code as offense codes that are not included in our guide. And we felt like we really addressed what was most important for our community. Certainly, if there were an incident that was outside that, we put a notation in the document that said these are potential offense codes, so we could use anything that is at the disposal of the state. But we really tailored this to what is important, what we felt like was important for our community.
Other questions or comments? So you're putting a copy of this on the image for every one of the new Chromebooks you give out?
As the very first page that you open.
You know they got one.
Yes.
We could certainly look into doing that. I mean,
You
it's
can.
easy enough to
That way you know
calculate.
you provided one. to
Yes.
every
Yeah.
student.
It's actually not a bad idea. Actually, it's a really good idea. Mr. Durrett?
Yeah, we can set that as our start page if you want to
I
do.
like it.
Then we will.
I'm gonna have to look it up today.
You met your photo.
All right.
Thank you.
Dr. Jones?
Thank you. Next up is approval. At this time of year, we always are up against a timeline for federal grant approvals. Title I grant, which is our grant that works with students who have needs, economic needs. Title II, which is our professional development, supporting effective instruction, and Title III, which is for our students, our English language learners. So we have those available. Dr. Thomas oversees Title I and is available for any questions that you have on that. And Dr. Monroe does Title II and Title III.
All right, questions? Comments? They are seeking approval this evening.
I make a motion we accept the federal grant certifications for Title I, Title II, and Title III applications for next year.
All right, Stephen's made a motion. Is there a second? Sarah's a second in this evening's motion. All in favor, please respond with aye. Aye. Any noes? Motion carries 4-0, members present. Dr. Jones?
Thank you. I do want to, before we leave this item, thank Dr. Thomas, Dr. Alejandro. These grants, while you're looking at one page, take dozens of hours to complete. The federal bureaucracy around them is immense, and there's several other staff members that they take the lead on that. So thank you for your work on that, making sure we're getting every dollar that we can from to support our students. Next item is our approval of fiscal year 2019 budget amendments to bring us in line with state and local dollars that we received after the board approved the budget on March the 27th. We've talked about this a couple of times. We discussed it at our last meeting. Mr. Johns is here also to provide some additional information to the board for their consideration before we bring this forward as a request for approval.
If you could bring up the attachment, please, for this that amends the category budgets. Yes, as Dr. Jones said, we do need to amend the budget based upon Board of Supervisors and the state budget. We need to reduce it by the $326,430. But before the board votes on that, I'd like to just go over a few highlights of the budget, because I think we've accomplished a whole lot in this budget this year, and I think it's a good bit for us to be proud of what the school board was able to do. Just some of those highlights is the first thing, we had made a commitment to the Board of Supervisors 3 years ago that we would return $650,000 in savings as a result of closing the school. And the commitment was that we would do it in FY19, but we started that 2 years early, and we complete that commitment with this budget. We've also made some significant changes to our health insurance coverage this year by implementing some cost control measures. As you know, we replaced the Key Advantage expanded with the Key Advantage at 250. Most of the employees that were on the expanded plan moved to the 250 plan, but we did have 14 that went to the 500 plan, and we also had we had 6 that were in expanded that went to the high deductible. We had 24 that were in the 500 plan that went to the high deductible. And the high deductible and health savings account incentive was another cost control measure that we implemented, and we had 30 employees move into that. So in addition to the ones that are already there, we now have 47 employees that are in the high deductible plan with the health savings account. And as the board in the discussions that we were having over health insurance wanted us to have the ability to upload that incentive if employees need it. Out of the 47 employees, we had 44 that requested that we do that, and we have done that for those employees. And the third thing on health insurance is that the school board was able to put more money into health insurance to pick up more of the a higher percentage of the premium, so that we could move a little closer to the level of support that the county provides their employees, and we did make a significant jump in that. The next thing that is significant was the outsourcing of the food service, and we've talked about that for a while, but that gave us the ability to reallocate $230,000 to other needs in the budget. And more importantly is, we're projecting that the employees' participation in the breakfast and lunch programs is going to increase by over 40%. And there's a guarantee in that contract for that. And so that will be a good thing. Now, the employees that moved to Sodexo, they, as we discussed before, are getting a 3% increase. And also, Sodexo offers them a leave incentive plan as well, and so they could earn up to $180 a year if they don't use their sick leave for that year. So that's good for them as well. Another really big item is the salary increases, and we were able to this year provide a 2% across the board for all employees, as well as targeted adjustments for some employees for a max of 5%. And I want to just kind of walk through the process of how we did that. First, every employee was moved up one step on the scale that they were on. If that gave them 2%, fine. If it didn't, we adjusted the scale so that they got at least 2%. If it gave them more, then that was fine too. We then took each scale and compared it to the most recent salary survey that we did that was presented to the board back in late fall. And each step of those scales were moved towards the median for that group. And so if we were able to get them to the median, fine, but it was capped at 5%. So no one got more than the total of 5% increase. Now there was one exception to that process, and that was the director scale. Our director scale, up until the one for next year, was lower than the secondary principal, and in some cases, some steps were also lower than our middle and elementary school principals. And this created a problem with progression. If we have either internally or externally a principal moving up to a director position, their experience on the scale is going to be, they would be making less money to move up. So we redid that scale to where it fell between the assistant superintendent and the secondary principal scale. Now, the employees that were on the director scale, and the exception was we didn't move them up a step. We actually had to move them down about 10 steps so that they would be capped at the 5%, and none of them received more than 5% because that's what the plan was approved by the board. And then an example is somebody was on step 28 in this fiscal year 18, then they got moved down to step 10 so that they would be at that 5% cap on for FY19. And everybody on the director scale, fell in that 5% cap because the director scale within the region on an hourly basis is 9 out of 10 was the median ranking. We also made some corrections to some other scales. Our maintenance and mechanics scales, years ago they were separate scales, but they were the exact same numbers. So probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we put them on just one scale. When in doing the salary survey and reviewing the salary survey, if you look at the average ranking for maintenance staff, they're ranked 8 in the region. But the mechanics staff is ranked 11 in the region. That's their average. And so looking down the road, if you were ever to get the maintenance staff to the median and you stopped doing any targets, and that's assuming we're able to do targets in the future, the mechanics would no longer, get a target, but they should, so that, all employee groups can get moved to the median. So all we do is separate those on the scale. They still fell under the same rules of a, max of a 5%, but we do have 2 separate scales for the maintenance and mechanics now. And then the last thing, pay scale adjustment or correction that we made, was every one of our scales had at least 2 steps that were the same rate of pay. Some of them, had multiple steps that were the same rate of pay, and that was because there were years that we were unable, funding didn't allow us to give pay increases, so we just added another step and it was the same amount. We adjusted all of those, and we don't have any of the steps that are on the same scale right now. And so that was another thing that we were able to achieve with this budget. We did have a major obstacle to overcome because the composite index changed this year and went up a good bit. That cost us $750,000, but we were still able to overcome that. And then lastly, last comment, the state revenues projected for the biennium for FY20 has us increasing $639,000 above what we're projected to receive for FY19. The main reason for that, over $432,000 of it, is geared towards a 3% salary increase that the state is encouraging us to make on July 1 of 19. Our salary adjustments that are going into effect in 18 are going to meet the requirements for that. So we, if we can do something in 25, but you're not going to be, pressured to in order to get that funding because you would have already done it. And so those are the things, and that helps because salary increases are a continuing expense, and we, looking forward to 20. We know that we're going to receive the funding to maintain those.
Mr. Jones, I think I may have missed it, but I don't think you specified which employee classifications received more than the 2% base salary.
And you're right, I did not mention that. Pretty much all of them. I mean, we did the teachers, we did the administrators, we did clerical staff, we did maintenance mechanics, we did drivers. And so we were able to, and I was real pleased with what we were able to achieve this year.
Thank you.
All right. Questions for Mr. Johnson?
So the recommendation is that the board amends the operating budget for fiscal year 19 to the amount of $46,734,797.
Mr. Chairman, one question. Mr. John, you did say there was a payment transfer to the county in this for the last
Yes,
run?
yes, there was.
And that's included in the operations and maintenance, is that where it is?
Well, the way that does is when
We
we,
just don't get it.
the first draft, we have it included as a transfer down at the bottom where you see the return to Powhatan.
Right.
But before the school board approves the budget, the county actually will just reduce our revenue by that
I
amount.
remember you saying it.
Yes, sir.
Show it.
Right, and that last amount that we had this year was $176,648.
And I did ask Mr. Johns earlier, 2-3 months ago, about to give me a chart on how many teachers were making significantly less at their pay step than teachers 10 years ago. You sent me that, and it was not nearly as dire as I had thought it was going to be, and I do appreciate that information.
And I had meant to go back after we did this to see, because when we did that, it looked like there was going to be maybe 10 steps that might still be below that level. I think that there are none, but I can't say for sure without going back and updating that analysis now that we have this scale.
When you get a chance, that would be helpful.
Yes, sir,
There were a
I'll
couple of
do
teachers
that.
that were
I'd like that too.
concerned about that, and if we can show progress, I think that would really help. And I do, and I just, as one board member, I think all of us feel the same way, but we really appreciate the work, because we know there's a lot of work between you and probably Ms. Horn and lots of other people, and to go through each one of those steps and try to make those adjustments, which I'm sure was very tedious and very time consuming, so thank you.
Well, it is, but you're right. There are a lot of staff, that review this over and over and over to make sure we have it right. And if we miss something, we fix it. And so.
Any other, yes, ma'am, Ms. England?
So where are we with the teacher salaries? I still am hearing that teachers that have been here for 10 or 15 years are only making a few hundred more than a beginning teacher. And they feel like that's still not right. So is that before you did all this, or?
Now, that depends upon how that's being said. A teacher, let's see if I have a teacher scale here. There's a good bit of difference between the first step on the teacher scale and the last step. If they're saying that they're only making a few $100s between where they were 10 years ago and where they are this year, that's also not correct. If they're saying that if you look at the scale from 10 years ago and the scale today and look at the same level, then yes, that could be true, that there's only a little bit of difference between those scales. But each year, the staff that we've had have been moved up a step and have received increases for all the years that we did increases. If I'm making sense.
Yeah, and Ms. Emil, there are no steps on this teacher scale. I just pulled it up online. A beginning teacher would make, on a 200-day contract with a master's, would make $45,938, and at the 10-year mark, they would make $48,826.
That's the beginner's salary and the 10-year salary.
Yes. And I'll remind you, and I know you know this, but I'll remind the public also that we take each one of those steps and compare it to where we are at the region level. And that's where we try to move it. So that was part of the work Mr. Johns talked about, is to make sure there isn't any step that's the same, so that when teachers move up with a year of experience, they are receiving more money. Now, the difference in one step isn't a lot of money, but it is more money. So there is that progression or ladder that we're looking to try to achieve.
So we have steps back in place.
Yes. But our steps are based on years of experience, so they move up a step each year, provided that we can provide a raise. Where we get into trouble is in the years like from 07 to 012, where we weren't able to provide a raise. We still move people up a step, but then that step ends up being the same as the previous step because there was no more money attached.
Creates artificial progression.
Yeah. And so is this on the,
That is on the website,
website
underneath Human Resources.
Human Resources?
Yes.
Information to medical.
Yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Jones? I'm not sure if this is a question or, well, I guess it is a question. So based on the unique nature of this transfer, we finished this is our third year, we've now satisfied that commitment that we made to the county to transfer that amount of money back. I know you've talked about the fact that it's kind of recognized in the budget documents and those things that we've met the threshold number. Since that's sort of unique, it seems like it might be appropriate to memorialize that somehow in some correspondence from Dr. Jones to the county that we've been good stewards and met the total number that we need. So it's very clear that we've done exactly what we committed to do.
Ahead of time. Ahead of time, because we started 2 years ahead of time.
So
So,
we're at that.
right.
We'll take care of that.
Thank you.
I think that's really good as well, because I also think that the fact that we were able to absorb $320,000 cut to to what was an austere budget to begin with, by doing some things and basically, no longer in the math science center. We think we're okay with that, but the food service piece was pretty significant and will be a pretty significant piece over the coming years. But you really only see it in this year's budget. Budget.
Right.
But and I appreciate Mr. Johns mentioning that. And so that was a big decision, but I'm not sure what else we can outsource in the future to save that kind of money.
Agreed. All right, other questions or comments? All right, so you're looking at this point for some action, right?
Yes, sir.
I will make a motion to amend the operating budget for FY18 to the amount of $46,734,797.
Okay. We have a motion, is there a second?
And then,
It's 46.
47,797.
734, 797.
That's what I said.
Total
That's what she
operation.
said. All right, I'll second what she said.
I think we were all checking to make sure it's the right number. Yes, Ms. Ayers is exactly right.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor of amending the operating budget, please respond with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. The members present, Mr. Punk is absent. All right, Dr.
Okay, next item is another item we always have this time of year, and that is closing out our 17-18 fiscal year. There's information that's been presented in boilerplate for updated categories. If you take a look at those categories, and Mr. Johns will go through some of the changes that we have to make to close out our 17-18 budget.
Right, and you know, in reading my muddy crystal ball every year, because we're basically having to project 2.5 months in advance, because we have payrolls that we run in July and August, we've got revenues that come in July and August, and those all have to be accrued by June 30. But this is where we are right now. We do need to increase the technology category, and we also need to increase the operation and maintenance category. The technology, the increase in technology, I mean, we do increase that category almost every year, but it's a little higher this year than it's been in the past, and that is because as we placed our orders at the end of FY17, some of them did not come in until after June 30, and that meant that they had to be expensed to this fiscal year. Fortunately, the VPSA dollars roll forward with those to, you know, pay for it, and so that is what has happened for that category. In the operation and maintenance category, there are two things that impacted that and caused us to need to put some money there. One is the hockey field lighting at the high school, and the other is the facility study with Train. Even though when Train did the presentation, the cost of that study, that $46,000, was something that could be rolled in and recouped through savings. The decision has not yet been made that, you know, for us to move forward with that, but we have incurred the expense, and so per accounting rules, we must expense that to this fiscal year, and so that's, you know, what we're doing. That would, if we do move forward, that's going to reduce that total, you know, contract by the $46,000, because we would have, you know, paid for that already. And so those are the two things that need to be changed. As far as where the money's coming from, you can see a good bit of that is coming from the instruction category. And Mr. Cole mentioned already about the Math Science Center. That's something that, you know, we've always prepaid that at the end of the fiscal year because it's due July 1. So we're not, you know, paying that now for next year. And so that's a good bit of the savings that we have for that. Some other things that were savings in the instruction category. Our unemployment expenses were less this year. Workers' comp insurance was less. Our leave payments for retirements and travel were less. All those things add up and give us the ability to move those dollars into technology. And then there was also one other, I mean, to go into operation and maintenance, most of that money's coming out of the CIP projects, the $143,000. We put a little bit more in there to cover the training study. And so one other reason why we had to increase the technology is we did have some technology software that was budgeted in the wrong category. That expense is a technology expense, and so this adjustment also moves that money to technology where it has to be expensed to comply with DOE. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to address them. But the recommendation is that the board does amend our category budgets as presented on this chart.
Are there any questions for Mr. Johns? Mr. Chairman, Mr. Johns, so you mentioned that some technology money from last year was being rolled into this year's budget. Is that reflected on this sheet at all?
No, this is just the expenditure piece of it. Okay. But the, I mean, we're fine on the revenues, but those revenues you can't get reimbursed on any of these grants until after you spend money. And so that, money, part of it has already come in for this, and I expect the rest of it to come in a week or two. Because I had requested back when we incurred that expense back in July, had requested those dollars in August, and they've come in. But the dollars that we're just now spending, you had to wait till we spend them to get the request, so they'll come in as well.
So we're able to use some of those VPSA dollars to purchase the middle school Chromebooks this year. And we'll be getting the rest of those dollars in to cover those expenses after July 1st. So we may see a similar lag, which is what's causing these transfers to occur, because we have to wait for the state to reimburse us once we purchase the Chromebooks.
But the end result is that, when those dollars come in, it may, increase whatever leftover dollars there are at the end of the year, and those would go to the school CIP reserve.
So we would see an increase then maybe in the state sources of revenue.
Right, for what was budgeted, yes, sir.
That was what I was getting to.
Right.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, if there are no questions, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the category budgets for 2017-18 as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with members present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is we would like approval that the school board approves the finance arrangements for the lease purchase of 11 buses, and to authorize the Assistant Superintendent of Finance to complete the municipal lease purchase agreement. These are funds that are in the county CIP that we are expending per the approved CIP to update our fleet. Mr. Johns has some more detailed information he will quickly go over with you.
Right, and this is the process we've done for the past 3 years, because the county wants to do lease purchase on buses rather than cash purchase. The buses, we buy our buses off of the state contract, and Kingmore Supply, had the lowest price again this year, as they have the last 2 years for us. The financing arrangements for the last 2 years, as well as this year, would be through Santander Bank. This attachment, as far as the loan documents, require that the school board, approve this arrangement. Now, this arrangement is going to change just a little bit. It may go down $7,500 as we, get the pricing on some of our trade-in buses. I have reviewed all of this with the county, with Charla, to make sure that it falls within the cash money that they have. It falls within the lease payment money that they budgeted, for this. They have a $139,000 cash payment that's factored as a down payment here. They had budgeted where our lease payments would not exceed $182,000, and this 5-year lease purchase plan is below that, 182. And basically what we're looking at is a 3.68 lease purchase, or is the terms for 5 years. And again, that was gone over with Charla as well, the county finance director, to see if they could potentially get any better terms somewhere else for us. And they were not, and they're fine with this arrangement as well, with these terms.
I just have one. So the county has confirmed that this is their preferred method. They wish us to continue moving forward with the lease arrangement?
Yes. Okay. Yes, they have. And like I said, this is, this is the 4th year now that's doing this process and all of that, so.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm that was a feedback.
Yes.
For your,
Have it in writing.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Very interesting that years ago they forbid us from doing lease purchasing, and now they want us to do lease purchasing, but that's fine. I like it.
All right. Item D. That's your request and approval. Is there a motion regarding item B?
Make a motion, we approve the municipal lease purchase of, did you say 11 school buses?
Mhm.
11 school buses.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye. Aye. Any noes? Motion carries 4-0. Dr.
No, I'm sorry. I was gonna say,
The
we also
second-
need
the
the
second
second part of that motion that would give him the authority to finalize that lease,
Documents.
the lease documents.
All right.
The loan
Would
documents.
you like to amend your motion to include the second component?
Yes, I will.
All right. So it's a friendly amendment. Any objection from board? So the motion we'll be voting on is to include both components of item D, which would be to approve the lease arrangement and also authorize the assistant superintendent to complete the municipal lease purchase agreement. All right? And Mr. Cole, you confirm that you have seconded that motion?
I'll second it.
All right, so now we're voting on Ms. Engel's motion, which has the two elements included, which Mr. Cole has seconded. All in favor of Ms. Engel's motion, please respond with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Next item is three policies that we presented to you last month. The first policy is personal leave policy. As a reminder, this is just a policy that allows the accrued personal leave to roll over up to the maximum allowed amount per policy without the employee having to do extra work or our finance staff having to do extra work. So it would be an automatic accrual of personal leave up to the maximum amount, which is 6 days for most of our staff. So we're looking for approval of that change in policy GCBDF. I don't know if you want to take these
Yeah, I'd like to take it one
individually.
at a time.
Mhm.
So, any questions regarding GCBDF, the personal leave policy? All right.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve policy GCBDF, the personal leave policy.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye. Aye. Any noes? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. The next policy is GCBDD, which is annual leave policy that we talked about. We got some feedback from the board that they would like to have the policy for their consideration to reflect some years of service before people can take advantage of this benefit. So the policy has been revised. It now, individuals who retire from us are allowed to receive up to their accrued amount of annual leave. If an employee resigns, they have to be here a minimum of 5 years. And if they are here more than 5 years and less than, or 5 years, then they would receive up to 12 days of unused leave. Employees with 6 to 10 years of experience could be paid up to, and this is of course dependent upon them having this amount of leave, up to 18 days of unused leave, and those employees with more than 11 years of employment would receive 24 days of unused leave. We also added in that last sentence in that policy that Ms. Horn and I talked about is any employee who resigns their employment prior to the end of that contract year, so if they resigned in October or December, they would forfeit that year's earned leave per Section A of the policy, so they wouldn't be able to cash out that leave if they haven't completed their contractual year. So we think that we've included language in here that, based on the feedback from the board last year, that would reward our long-term employees with the benefit, but also not have somebody coming in for a year or two and then being able to cash out leave. Happy to answer any other questions. Ms. Horn can also answer any other questions that the board may have.
All right, questions for Dr. Jones or Ms. Horn or comments?
One question.
Yes, ma'am.
This will be effective July the 1st. It will not be retroactive or,
That would be something that the board would have to decide upon if they chose to do it. The one caveat I would say is if we start it now, prior to July 1st, there's a possibility that we would have to come back and look at our budget amendments as well, because it could impact budget amendments, because Mr. Johns hasn't figured that into his calculations for the end of year budget. So the cleanest thing would be to start at July 1st, but we could certainly make it effective as of today, and any employee who's resigning, we could apply this policy to them.
How many employees would that affect? Quite a few.
No, I think it's
it would
one.
be very many,
Yeah.
and I don't know that it would impact the year-end budget amendment that the board passed. It's just a caution that it may. I would want to go do the calculations, but I really don't think it would be much. There's money to do it, it's just isn't in the right bucket.
Would it be easier for us to do that, or easier for those pieces to change the resignation?
Some of them have already been accepted and,
Right.
Yeah, the fulfilling contractual year,
right.
so July 1st is good.
Plus, we've already calculated payrolls and all that kind of stuff for July, June, July, and August. So if the board desires to make it effective this fiscal year, I would just say let us go and do the calculations, and if there's an issue, we'll come back to you for an amendment later. If there's not, then we're good.
Just ask for the same thing as Charles, let's approve the policy, consider the change in the effective date. If we want to amend the effective date, we can amend the effective date later.
My recollection is Mr. Kunka had some comments about, in our discussion about this policy, and I recognize it pales in comparison to the budget that we just approved, but, I mean, we certainly have a quorum, but I'm just.
I had some concerns about it too, and some of those have been addressed. Section G, where it talks about how many days you'll actually pay employees for, makes me feel much better. Because I was real worried that, we could have somebody here for a couple of years that had experienced to gain 48 days of leave and not use any of them. We'd be paying that person 48 days of leave and all been found in paying for 1 year. So that part gives me some comfort in that you're putting a cap on exactly how many you're going to pay people for. So I'm more comfortable with the policy now than I was. And I could support it at this point as opposed to the first read that I had before. I don't have any problem postponing this. I don't think it's going to make a difference at this point. Is there any impact if we postpone it to August?
No impact other than to know that less than a handful of employees that may be able to benefit this year.
But we could still say, that we'd have to prove it, we couldn't go back and say we're going to make it.
Do it retroactive. That's what you're talking about. I don't think, is that right, Mr. John?
Well,
Retroactive.
it was just, if you approve it in July or August, it's just going to make whatever the retroactive approval, the expense would be in next fiscal year budget.
Right.
There is one other group though that could be impacted, and that is our food service employees. We did have some that were eligible to retire, and they did, and they received, a payment, but there were some that were not eligible to retire, and they're going to work for Sodexo. So that is one thing.
None of those are 12-month employees.
Yeah, they're not,
No.
just, this is only annually.
But were there managers though
They work for
that were not eligible to retire?
I'm pretty sure that's tonight.
My concern is, I apologize, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying, too, my concern is that we're treating the employees fairly as a group. I'm certainly, I appreciate the situation of any individual employee, but I want to make sure our policies are fairly applied and fair to the employees as well. So I wasn't suggesting a moment ago putting it off. I felt like Mr. Kunk had made some comments, but if everyone is comfortable moving forward, I have no problem with that. Ms. Engel, do you have any comment for us?
Well, I agree with what you stated, that I feel that every employee should get the same
Right.
benefit, yes. Not choose you over.
The big change here is that we're going to include now payouts for people who resign, right? It used to be only for people that retired.
That's right.
So, and we have had this request made to us probably a half dozen times over the last 3 or 4 years, and the policy wouldn't, we did not want to make an exception to the policy, so this policy allows for that payment now moving forward. I'm not opposed to the change. I'm not terribly excited about it, but I'm not opposed to it.
And I would just only add, and Mr. Cole's absolutely accurate, is that we did go back and check what other districts are doing, and every district that we checked, which was about half a dozen, do pay out annually for those who resign. Some of them have a graduated system like this that rewards the longer-term employees over the shorter-term employees. That's not to say that we have to do that, but I just wanted to remind the board that we did have that data point as well. And certainly I think the cleanest thing to do would have it effective July 1st. And then it would be, it's a new policy, it starts with the new year, and employees, when they start out that year, they would know that that's the policy that they have. There would be less than a handful of employees that could benefit from it this year that wouldn't, but they also knew what the policy was when they resigned.
Is there any way we could approve it for July the 1st and that handful of people be, just say we would grandfather them into the new? I mean, I'm just asking a question just because of the fact that we've been considering this. It was brought up last meeting for consideration, and now, I mean, it's kind of been in the process for a month or so. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. And if this does not serve us well, I mean, we can always go back and reverse the policy.
Sure.
So, I think that this is something we're just gonna have to, if we approve it, just approve it, knowing that we may have, if it turns out to be not a good thing, then we would reverse it, we would just amend the policy.
Well, I will say that I support the concept. I think that the employee earns the leave. The leave is theirs, and if they choose to leave us to go to another employer, they earned it while they were here. In my mind, they earned it while they were here, and it doesn't seem unreasonable that they should have some kind of benefit, because if we permitted them to take all of that leave before they left, the county would have to somehow pay for that. So the schools,
So if they went from our district to another district, they can't take their days with them?
They can take sick leave with them.
But they can't take their name.
It depends on what the receiving district's policy is.
It's not necessarily.
And we're only talking 12-month employees, so it's a much smaller subgroup of employees. It doesn't impact teachers or bus drivers or anything like that. It's like maintenance staff, office, administration, that type of thing that are on a 12-month contract.
I have another question, just because this isn't enabling me to pull up the whole policy. In the first sentence, it says retiring employees must have written approval to use accumulated leave and lieu payment. It doesn't say who. It does.
It says supervisor, prior written approval by the employee's supervisor must be obtained before such employee may use an accumulated annual leave in lieu of
That's
receiving
in the
payment
policy
thereof.
itself, because I'm
Yes.
just looking at the.
Oh, yeah,
little
no, that's in the
notes. Okay.
policy.
Okay. I couldn't remember if I
It-
read that or not.
And it
so-
continues to say, just because you can't pull it up, this approval will include a schedule that provides for smooth transition of duties. Superintendent will intercede with the schedule only when requested by either party.
Okay, and I can't pull it up, I just wasn't on the right zone page, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
How many employees are affected by this?
The
If we
resignation.
approve this change, how many employees are actually affected? How many would fall within the category of being eligible to do what is contemplated to do?
If you're referring to the resignation part, I would say up to.
No, I'm not asking how many have done that. I'm asking what percentage of our workforce would actually be eligible for this consideration? The 12-month category, how many
Yeah,
people?
the 12 months.
Very small.
Well, somewhere between 30 or around that number, because you're talking about administrative staff, that, principals, assistant principals,
Some guidance counselors,
directors.
some new teachers.
You have just a couple of 12-month,
I would say it's probably 20%. Well, we have clerical staff, we have maintenance staff, mechanics. It's probably 20% of our staff.
So the fiscal impact is relatively modest. Is that right?
yes.
We don't have a lot of people who resign and go elsewhere, most retire.
The other thing Larry pointed out earlier, we do have an incentive policy for people to not use leave, and then when you don't use leave, it's like, oh, well, you don't get that either. So it does kind of work along with what we're trying to say, is that you're important to be here and to have that option to either use the leave or receive compensation for it. Does feel like a pretty good benefit.
This one, sure. Okay. All right. Further discussion? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept the GCVDD annual leave as stated.
Effective on what date?
Effective, you want to do effective? Okay.
Well,
Okay, let's
is
take
it
that.
automatically effective on July 1st if we don't specify a date?
It will be effective today.
All right, so what date do you want to make it effective, if you don't mind specifying?
I'm good for today, because if we do it July 1st and make it grandfather, it's the same thing.
Yeah, so, okay, so what should we do?
All right.
I'll say July 1st, and then, well, what's less work? I'll say.
Do it effective.
It's simpler.
All right, I make, okay, effective today, June 26th.
All right, motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much. Next policy is IGBC. This is a requirement for Title I funding. There are no changes to the policy this year, but we have to get school board approval of the policy annually.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, next is policy KKA, which is service animals in public schools. This policy is updated to clarify that a distinction has been made between members of the public who require a service animal when visiting PCPS schools for individual events and those who are looking to bring a service animal to school on a regular basis. It also clarifies expectation that a copy of current health information be provided when developing an access plan, and as a reminder, these were both recommendations from the school board attorney to amend this policy.
Okay,
Okay, I make a
Discussion?
motion,
that's okay, you can proceed if you're ready.
I'll make a motion that we accept policy KKA.
Second?
Motion is second, all in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. The next item is that the school board approves increasing meal prices for student lunch by 5 cents for the 2018-2019 school year per federal mandates.
I make a motion, we accept the 2018-19 school lunch and breakfast prices.
All right.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Next item is to recommend approval of a delegate and alternate delegate to represent Powhatan County School Board at the VSBA State Conference.
Mr. Cole, while you were absent last month, it was myself, and I think you were the alternate, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I think I was.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I believe
Okay,
it.
sorry.
Unless if you would like
I make a motion.
Yeah, and I think we took pity on you and didn't do that while you
Oh,
were
I
not
thought we-
present, so.
I thought we
don't know,
had.
that sounds
but
better,
that's-
so.
Okay.
And that's, I'm willing to serve as the alternate, since you were not present, I don't want to put you in that position. So, so you want to make a motion to that effect yourself as the
I probably shouldn't
I'll
make
make-
myself.
How about you?
I'll make
You might be
a
willing to
motion
do that.
We appoint Ms. Ayers as a delegate and Mr. Walters as the alternate for the 2018 PSBA convention
All right.
in November.
And I'll second
With
that.
great appreciation.
All right, so all in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Absolutely none. All right, motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. The next item is to recommend approval of the VSBA policy service agreement. This is the policy where we get our policies from. It's an annual fee that we are looking for approval to continue with Powhatan be associated with VSBA's policy services, and it's a $2,500 fee for us to receive all these wonderful updates that make sure we stay in line legally with what we should be doing.
It's a very valuable service, I think, and a pretty much a bargain for what they do, considering they have legal services behind it too. That being said, I will make a motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Next item is, this is just information. These are the proposed 2018-2019 student fees. We have a document attached that has proposed for 2018-2019, and then there's notes beside any of the ones that are changed or proposed to be changed. Dr. Alejandro has worked with the principals and administration at each of the schools, as well as sponsors of national organizations that we have to impose fees on. So Dr. Alejandro, anything you want to share with us about this document?
We did try to make sure that if there were fees that were similar at the middle and the high school, that they would be in line with each other as much as possible, so that each of the organizations would have similar funding.
And I think I ask this question every year, but the students that can't afford the fees, like for cosmetology and things like that, there's a process that would enable them to still do that.
Yes, ma'am. I actually went into the policy about that this year just to look at it, and it's actually stated in policy that that they can request waivers of fees, and that we make that available for them, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, further questions or discussion?
I noticed that in years past, there have been questions about uniforms for performing arts folks. So I don't see any uniform fees on here, and where they're related to now.
So those are incurred based on whatever the production or performance is, and based on annual needs. And so the sponsors will budget for those, and then they'll do fundraising or assess the students that are participating in the activity. But those are usually presented to the families in advance, and that could include, some of our athletic. You don't see any athletic fees up here because we pay for athletics. However, a lot of times they like to have that extra package of socks and a T-shirt and whatever. So there are those accessory types of fees. And I think you're alluding more towards band or show choir or some of those more expensive activities. And again, those are put up front. And then if there is a need, that we certainly listen to those needs from parents as well.
And a lot of those fees that aren't on here are elective fees. Students are choosing to participate in those activities and know that there will be fees incurred as a result of that. But we do work with, especially the performing arts groups, because they're the ones that typically have them, to make sure that those fees are as reasonable as we can make them, and that they aren't excessive, or that we're not pricing out families.
And it's not unique to public schools, because anybody that has kids in dance or gymnastics knows that the uniform fees can become pretty expensive pretty quickly. And I appreciate the efforts to try to keep those reasonable, because they can become a lot.
Yes.
Sure.
And Mr. Cole, within the budget too, in the last few years, just in the area of band, Dr. Jones has been able to provide instruments through the through the regular budget process. So a lot of times there was fundraising that happened for some of those organizations to provide some of those things that we no longer need to. So that has helped to allow the fundraising fees or fundraising benefits to go directly into student activities.
So we will bring this back to you in August for
Yes.
approval. If you have any questions or hear any concerns, please let us know. We'll be happy to address them.
All right, thank you, sir.
Next item is the newest batch of revised VSBA school board policies. So these are, most of these are based on new legislation that was passed, and we are providing these to you at this point, and we will bring them back on August 7th, 2018 for approval. We separated out, these are just the ones that are really code changes, language changes, not substantive changes. We pulled out some that staff is still working on that were new policies that we need to either provide a regulation or provide more policy analysis of them. So we'll bring those back to you at the first meeting in August for your review and then approval at the second meeting. So we did split up what we received from VSBA.
And are we getting the little paper?
Yes.
Do you want a paper copy?
Well, just of the,
Explanation sheet?
And the
Right,
policies.
okay.
You don't need copies.
not the entire policy, what you usually
Just the
give us.
explanation sheet.
Explanation, yeah.
Sure.
Because then when you're going through the policy, you can
Yep.
have it while you're.
All right, any questions about this information before we move on? Or comment?
Well, thank you for dividing them up, number one, and
How
thank
much
you
prefer
for.
that? All right, so we're getting ready, now we have item 4K.
Mr. Chairman, that was initiated by me, it's not really Dr. Jones's, but I appreciate his help and support on this. They'll meet on the James contacted me, and I think they talked to Ms. Email too at some point. I think he went over there at some point, they talked to you a little about some of the things they're doing, but they are the group that has been working to maintain local ownership of the Bellmead properties here in Powhatan County. And they have all assurances that they'll close on this property sometime in the next month. But in the meantime, they've made several grant applications that they need to have ready to go once they get possession of the property. And some of those grants have to do with providing educational programs for the community and specifically for the schools. So they asked for a resolution that would say that we as a school board would support those educational programs in terms of creating them and developing them, and we would support those programs by encouraging our teachers to take advantage of them. And I did add a thing on there about thanking them for their efforts to secure this property. I think there was some real concern that a local resource and asset would be lost. It's going to be preserved at this point largely. I don't know all the details, but the alternatives to this could have been pretty dire. So that's my resolution. I've shared it with you in draft form a couple of times. Dr. Jerry shared it with you the time. There's nothing on here that's not part of a normal resolution. So basically, it's just an official act that says this board is supportive of that educational partnership with them.
And my recollection is they posted our students on several occasions, and it's been a good partnership.
We had the 6th grade day there last year, I believe it was, and they had all different kinds of stations for the students, and I know that they talked about having faculty have workshops there. It's just a wonderful, I think would be a wonderful resource, as Mr. Cole said, to our students and teachers of our county.
Great resource.
Thank you, Mr. Cole, for bringing this forward.
So are you gonna make the motion?
I'll make a motion to approve this resolution.
And I'll second it.
All right, my motion is second. All in favor of approving the resolution, please respond with aye. Aye. Any opposed? No, motion carries 4-0. All
Mr.
right.
Chairman, I have
Yes,
one
ma'am.
request, and that is that we, because I've been sitting here thinking, when I made the motion to consider the budget for, I would like to ask people, I may have said 46 million because, 46, what am I supposed to say, 46,000, because I'm not used to saying millions in dollars following numbers. Did I say it right? I just want to be sure, because I don't want her to go back and listen to the tape and realize that I said 46,000, because that would be really bad. So I did say 46 million.
I heard 46,000, but I
You
don't
did,
know if anybody else.
okay, so I think that I said it wrong, I truly do, I think I
I was
said
like, I
1,000.
thought that was a deal.
Yeah, that's a pretty good deal. I think I did say
All right.
1,000.
Pretty sure we corrected it.
Did we?
Yeah,
I think there was enough discussion to make sure that we.
Okay, well, now that we've just said that, I just want to be clear that my intent was, the motion was 46,734,797. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you get old, you second guess yourself about everything. Okay, that's all, I just wanted to make a statement.
All right, so, and there's no question amongst the board that for item 4B, the motion we voted on was to approve the transfer in the amount of 47 million. I'm gonna read it off the sheet, folks. 46,734,797. 46,734,797. There's full agreement that that is the motion we voted on. It was appropriately seconded, and we all voted in favor of that motion.
Thank you.
All right, so we've clarified our intent. All right, thank you for bringing that up. I certainly don't want there to be any
No, me either.
misunderstanding.
Me either.
All right. All right, so that takes us to our closed session. Potentially, we're gonna lose some of the audience in this room at the end of our closed session. So since this will be the last chance that I see you, for some of you, before the summer begins for you, I just wanted to thank all of you for your hard work, for your efforts, your dedication, all of the things you do to make the school so successful. Thank you very much. It is appreciated. As a parent in the school district, I appreciate everything you do. So thank you.
Thank
very
you
much.
all.
Okay.
Have a good summer.
Mr.
Working
Walters,
hard.
And I'll certainly open up, since I sort of took some latitude with the agenda at this point, I'll open it up to the other members if you want to make a comment. And I'll just kind of mention to Ms. Engel that I'm going to ask you in a moment if you would read the certification takes in the closed session.
Mr. Walters, I'll say my comments a minute ago. We want to thank Ms. Engel, which is the last official meeting. Appreciate all the good things you've done for us. Thank you very much.
I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Since I've intruded on the agenda at this point, anybody else want to make any comments? All right. Thank you again. The next item would be item 5. So Ms. Engel, if I could ask you to assist us with the certification and motion regarding our closed session.
Okay, I make a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to code 2.2-3711A1 to discuss the employment, resignation, and leave of specific employees. Codes 2.2-3711A1.
All right, we have a motion to enter in closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor of entering into closed session, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are in closed session.
Have a good evening.
Motion to come out of closed session first.
I make a motion to come out of closed session.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of coming out of closed session, please respond with aye.
Aye.
We're back in open session. Ms. Engel?
Whereas the Powhatan County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Powhatan School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification applies. And only business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that's comments, consent agenda, Dr. Flynn?
Yep, we're asking for approval of the consent agenda. We have a donation, some overnight field trips. We've also, as I shared with the board, some guidance that Ms. Wilson received when she did some school board clerk training was that minutes can be approved as part of the consent agenda, and that not all members have to be present in order to approve the minutes. So to simplify things, we're including those in the consent agenda if that's okay with the board. And then we have the personnel document addendum that we just discussed as well.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second.
All in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. And Ms. Wilson, thank you for that clarification. Appreciate that. All right, takes us to next steps, file open board comments. Ms. Emil, we'll start with you if that's all right.
Sure. I just want to say what wonderful end-of-year activities that were going on the last week of school. The STEM Day at Pocahontas Elementary, the Civil War Day at the middle school, field days at all schools. I received no calls or complaints from parents that students were doing nothing the last week. And I think this is the first year. So I just wanted to relay that and say that, the teachers are being very creative in what they're doing, and I think it's wonderful. And my second thing was great news about Belle Meade for our students in our community, and I'm so glad that you brought the resolution for us, Mr. Hall. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Emil. Mr. Cole?
Just a couple things. Ms. Ayers and I, of course, placed on an audit committee from the county. I made my first meeting this past week. And they're just looking, it's a citizen staff combination group of folks that are looking at general financial procedures. So as soon as I get the minutes from the last meeting, I'll share them with you. They're basically at this point looking primarily at county financial procedures, but at some point they want to expand into the school financial procedures. Did mention that at some point that we might want to consider on our own doing an audit of Chromebooks in terms of how many we just audit their procedures and how we do Chromebooks. And we talked about that at a board meeting a couple months ago, and I said we'd already started talking about that, and staff have been reporting back to us. So I just want to let you know that I am serving on that committee as one of the members of the school board. We're duly keeping informed with those things. The other thing is,
Can I ask you before we move on, just for clarification? So that's a county initiated committee that's they put together at the board of supervisor approach? Thank you.
Did Bill Mountain call you?
We do.
Yeah, about a year or two ago. Called me too to serve on. That's okay, we'll just let Valerie take over.
And I haven't been to a meeting yet because it
Did he
like,
call you too?
no, nobody ever called. I don't even know how I got on it.
But we
I really
should-
don't.
we
Nobody
shouldn't have
called.
all of you on it. It should-
Nobody
What I
called
was
me.
told is that they were going to contact and have one of you serve on that committee.
two, I think there's supposed to be two of the board supervisors.
Oh, that's just school board.
I think that's the way it is.
Well, I tried, but
I do have a copy of your short of their bylaws. It's interesting. It's an advisory group.
I agree with Ms. Emil's comments. I'm happy for you to represent the side. But I just don't know anything about it, so.
Yeah, just,
Trade between that and the delegate.
Yeah.
Anyway, it seems fair.
Yeah, but I just wanted you to know that. The other thing is, Appomattox Regional Government School is changing leadership. The director has resigned, the interim director has been appointed. That may have some budgetary impact on us in the future because you went from a part-time director to a full-time director. And one other thing that I thought about tonight as we were talking about leave, at some point, it doesn't have to be done anytime soon, but could we survey to see if our annual leave allotments or something similar to what people do? We are, 48 days leave is a lot. And maybe we need to look at that in terms of what other people are doing, and are there other things we can do rather than give somebody 48 days to, because I don't think many of our many people are qualified for it to use it. At some point, you probably at that point, I don't, contracts like 235 days, you took 48 days off, I don't really do it.
Yeah.
So maybe there are other things we can look at. That's just something.
And we have that chart this morning, keeps a running chart with some of our comparative districts, so we can send that to you. And
We also may want to be having people actually take it,
Yeah.
people eat it, lose it. Because, even though we do pay out 28 days and they retire, there may be several years that they're losing 20 days a year that they can't take.
and it converts to sick leave, right, Aaron?
And you max out sick
Yes.
leave.
Right,
You can't take that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's something certainly that we can take a look at, and I will tell you that we, especially since our contract is 245 days versus 260, we do have more leave than anybody in the region, or up in the total, so.
And like I said, it's not saying, our people don't deserve the benefit. I'm just saying, is there a better way to reward them rather than 48 days that they can't use?
Yep, gotcha.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bowles. Ms. Ayers.
The only thing that I thought of for next steps would be, in August, can we get an update on the attendance zone variances that were granted, and the numbers that we were aiming for in each school, and where they are, where they're gonna be?
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
I can't tell you off now, and I can get you specific numbers, but the variances were in line with what we were expecting. There wasn't a lot of movement or any movement that would cause us alarm. There was some, but it was some out of each of the three schools and to each of the three schools. So it wasn't anything that caused us any concern, but we can get you, and then we'll still get some trickle in. We got one a couple days ago, but we'll be happy to send you that information, and we'll bring it to you back in August.
It all looks good, the way we had planned, and it was a benefit to do that.
Absolutely. Yes.
Are we, are we going to 4-day work week, 4/10s?
Yes.
We are.
We're 4/10s, and staff has the opportunity or choice to work 4/8s and take a day, right, take a day of leave, right, on the week if they choose to do that, and that's supervised by each of the supervisors. And we're closed July 4th next week.
Just on that
Just for that Wednesday for the holiday.
I don't like when 4th of July's on the middle.
Makes it tough. Makes it tough to stretch it out, but you have the opportunity, and there's a lot of staff that take off, taking off next week, and there's a lot of staff that take that week off. It's the week before summer school starts, and
That's good. Okay, that's all.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, so I just have a couple of things. One is I would like to request that there's some way that Dr. Tibbs would keep us informed while we're not meeting regularly, but just something to us about sort of how the progress continues moving into the new building as you get ready for the next school year. I don't want to make a lot of work for you, but it would just be nice for us to sort of be aware of sort of how that's going, challenges you may be experiencing. I know Dr. Jones will communicate problems to us, but I would also be interested in the sort of things that are going well and the experiences of the staff, that kind of thing. That's what I'm interested in.
Well, I can tell you, if I may, June the 15th, we took the staff over there. They were very excited. Ms. Emo joined them over there. They were very excited to go over there. It was a great trip. We took them on 2 school buses. They were able to walk around, see their space, and so forth. All of them did an exceptional job, did exactly what we asked in terms of having their rooms packed up and ready to go. Hildreth started last Tuesday. We worked all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, and all day Thursday. We were originally scheduled for them to be here Tuesday through Friday, but we were able to move all of the teachers' belongings by the end of the day on Thursday. And so saved us a little bit of money there by not having to have the crew and the trucks out here on Friday. So all the belongings are in the building at this point. Ball Office Products is there. They started last week and they're continuing to be there to put in furniture, predominantly admin furniture and school counseling furniture, some student desks and some tables in the classrooms, file cabinets, things of that nature. So it's progressing. Today we were able, with Jeff's help and our technology group, we were able to get the phone line in permanently. So the fire system is up and running at this point. It is being monitored right now by Richmond Alarm. So the fire system, from an alarm standpoint, is there. We're still, from the water tower, still waiting on the suppression to be there. But from a monitoring standpoint, it's up.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yes.
So if I could just ask Dr.
Get
Jones,
regular
coordinate with him.
Absolutely.
And I would be interested in sort of as we begin to close out the budget issues, if you keep us advised of how that's going. So, and also the regular sorts of things that you've been providing us with, particularly the status of the workout. Okay. That's one of mine. The other thing I'd be interested in is as the planning moves forward on the open houses and the welcome for the students, that sort of thing, and all this, what those dates are and kind of how you perceive that taking place in the summertime when you get that indoors. The strategic plan we finished a couple months ago. You and Dr. Alejandro worked quite a bit on it.
Yes.
Ms. Engel and I got the opportunity to help with that, and we appreciate that. I do appreciate that. I'd like to know a little bit more about how you're contemplating using that. So a lot of the community's time was put into developing that document, and if you could give us some feedback on how you see the school system beginning to use that, and ideas of how you dedicate funding and staff and that sort of thing. And the last thing that I had was, Ms. Ayers, maybe 2 years ago now, had mentioned the idea of doing a board retreat, and I would like us to, I'd like you to think about that a little bit for us. And if there's a possibility that we can identify a date in August, at least think about how that could work. And what I'm thinking about is one of the issues that I think we could have some value in spending some time talking about in a little bit more protracted session than one of our meetings is things like the budget formulation and our procedures for the year. I think those issues, if we could spend perhaps maybe a couple of hours with a few less items and get a little deeper into some of those ideas about compensation and salary and those kinds of topics, there could be some value. So that's my comments. I think other than that, the only other thing I wanted to say is I didn't want to take to thank Ms. Wilmore. In my time on the board, I have really appreciated your engagement, your responses, your thoughtful way of thinking about the questions that I've posed to you. And I know sometimes I've asked you some things that I've asked you to stretch a little bit sometimes, and some of the answers that you've given me, and I appreciate that. It's been very, very helpful as a new board member and as the chairman. I will miss you. I've enjoyed working with you, and it has been a privilege, and I do sincerely wish you all the best in whatever your future holds. So I want to say that to you. So, and I know that they're going to miss you when it comes time to, particularly to recognize staff and some other things. It'll be very, very good. So that's all that I have, and for those that remain, I want to wish you a very, very happy summer, and look forward to seeing you again in August. So, Dr. Jones?
I have a lot. I just wanted to wish the board members a happy summer and a great July. We'll see you again in August. If you need anything over July, you can contact us. I'll continue to send updates and where we are in terms of getting ready for next year, both from a physical and staffing standpoint. And I will begin sending you some dates in August of when things will be happening if you want to attend some different events as we start to kick off for the year. But I hope that you're able to take some time to rest and relax yourselves. You put a lot of time and effort into serving the community, and you certainly deserve it just as much as our staff does. So thank you for that. Thank you to the staff. I've already said goodbye to Karen many times, and we'll continue to do so, and we'll miss her greatly. So it is a little sad that this is her last meeting. But my daughter got home about 2 hours ago for the first time I've seen her since Christmas, so I have no other comments.
All right, with that said, Dr. Jones is asking for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, please respond with aye. Aye. Motion carries 4-0. We are adjourned.
Great.